As we all know, the past 18 months has been like a never-ending marathon for healthcare workers. And this world at times can be dark and discouraging. How can we keep our passion going without burning out? How do you sustain it throughout your career?
Yeah.
What are the tips that, can help prevent and just kind of let that fire stay lit?
Well, that is a really good question. For the last 2 years, I've been reporting on this on Dr. Phil, the doctors, Fox News, which I'm the healthy living expert, and many stages around the world. And I can tell you this, as providers, the one thing we need to understand is that we have become more essential to humanity than ever. In fact, when we were listed as essential, some even people may even call us heroes. Now, I've never in my 35 years of experience seen the interest that people are having when it comes to their health. In fact, I'll give you a statistic that you may be surprised by. For the last 30 years, I have surveyed hundreds of thousands of people and asked one question: what are the 3 things that you value the most in your life? Less than 10% ever put health as a great value. Less than 10%. For the last year and a half, I've been doing the same survey question, and over 80% have put health as a top priority, as a top value. So the first thing to understand is this. Number one, as healthcare providers, we understand the human body. We understand the value of health more than the average person. So the main thing is not to be disappointed, not to be discouraged, that you care more about the health of that patient than they care about themselves. That is the one thing I remember every single day to keep me positive, to keep me excited, that just because they don't realize the importance of their health like I do after many, many years of studying and many years of experience, doesn't mean that I'm not going to give them my best. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to get excited and show up every morning like if it's the last day I'm going to see that patient. Think about it for a minute.
Yeah.
The second thing that I think is important to understand is that people right now are a little bit lost. In many of our clinics, including TrueCare, what we realize is that we're working a little harder than normal. And let me tell you, that is a blessing. That should never be looked in a negative way, because this is not going to necessarily be long-term, but it's a necessity right now because the majority of the people are finally recognizing they needed to pay attention to their health. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, it's not just managing their symptoms that we want to encourage them, but an engagement to take responsibility for the way that they're behaving, the way that they're thinking. Those are the 2 things that I discovered that really can impact someone's health. Now, they come to us as providers and we offer them great solutions, great suggestions, great tips. But in reality, many times, especially today, they're just a little bit confused. So if you're being called to add a little bit more work, a little bit more effort, I want you to say, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to right now show up like never before, because remember, the world needs you. Your community needs you today more than ever. Yeah. Because we've never had a precedent like this. We've never had something that has attacked the world the way this has and created so much fear in someone's life, so much devastation in someone's health. And that's where we come in very strong. So what I think of is not only the symptoms that I'm alleviating on my patients. I think about how those symptoms are going to let them go back to work, are going to get them out of the hospital and back to their home. It's going to help them pick up their grandchild because that grandchild thinks grandma doesn't love me because she's the only one that doesn't pick me up when I come home. Is to allow people to be able to travel, to walk their daughter down the aisle instead of having so much back pain that they have to stay home and say, honey, I can't do it. I'm suffering. So to stay positive during this time, don't think about what we're doing for our patients only as far as relieving their pain and suffering. Think about how their pain and suffering that we're relieving is getting them back to living the quality of life that they are deserving, even at a time like this. That's how I stay so positive all these years.
That's beautiful, Dr. Fab. I really, really like that. Resonated a lot with me in the sense that the more that you can focus on what the actual encounter will, the benefit that it exponentially to help their families or even get them to improve their activities of daily living, or like you said, even attend an event or take a trip on an airplane that they might not have been able to do. So yeah, no, that's awesome. Okay, moving on to our next topic. This one is one of my favorite quotes, but I believe firmly that you cannot give from an empty cup. And this morning I have my chiropractic spine cup, everyone. Just wanted to share that with you. 20 years ago, I purchased this at the chiropractic college bookstore, and my mother kept it all these years and it didn't break. So that being said, Dr. Fab, can you please share with us some of your best self-care tips in ways to support your daily routines that would support your physical, mental, and spiritual health?
Well, one of the things that I learned very early on is that my success is an extension of me. Please remember that. You can write it down. My success is an extension of me. Now, a lot of times, many of us are trying to be successful in our work, successful in our lives, successful in our relationships. But what happens? We don't make enough time for ourselves. So for many years, I've learned that the first hour of the day needs to be spent with me, nurturing me. There was a beautiful lady named Louise Hay that became really good friends with me. I happen to be one of her authors. And Louise taught me something very special many years ago. She said, I wake up in the morning every day and I go in the mirror and I say, Louise, I love you. And she said, Fab, that may be the only time that day, that week, or even that month that I will hear those words from anyone. So I learned to love myself first. And that love has to come from you. It cannot be from the people around you. So it begins there, loving yourself first, being a little bit more patient with yourself. Stop beating yourself up for the decisions you made, the mistakes you made, the things you wish that are done different. Remember that every decision we make is a preparation for a better decision in the future. So don't ever think of decisions or experiences as mistakes. I look at them as experiences that allow me to make better choices today. So it begins with that. So what is one of the routines that I've learned after all these years? I learned many years ago, learning about the human brain, that changing your physiology in the first thing in the morning changes actually your outcome for that day. So the first thing I do is as soon as I wake up with a lot of gratefulness, because that is the most powerful emotion first thing in the morning. Be grateful for another day. I came close to dying, and I know you know this, Dr. Jennifer. When I was 16 years old, I was involved in a robbery with about 10 people that came into the house. They tied me up, they gagged me, they hit me with a gun. They were looking for a safe that I didn't even know that it existed because I was staying at my uncle's house. And thank God, after an hour of that, the neighbors heard the commotion, the police came, I ended up in the hospital, but I was alive. I was alive. But at 16 years old, I made a decision to live my life that there was no tomorrow. That means all I have is today. So if I get another day, I wake up with a lot of gratefulness. Then I already have all my workout clothes laid out. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I hit the gym first thing in the morning. Why? Because I want to change my physiology. While I'm working out, what am I doing? I'm hearing inspirational, positive messages, things that I want to learn about, things that I'm passionate about, things that will set my mindset for that day. It could be inspirational, it could be spiritual, whatever it makes sense to you for that day. It could be just positive personal development, even as that. And then I go into, after that, a recovery. A recovery means that I have to feed my body some great nutrients in order to recover from that workout. And I learned that when I do that first thing in the morning, it's critical for those cells to be fed what they need, not only to produce the energy that I require, but also to allow my organs to function better. Mm-hmm. Then I go take a shower, I prepare for my day, and I'm ready to go. Now, as soon as I'm done with the shower, I review my goals for that day. Brian Tracy, a dear friend of mine, taught me many years ago, it's important not to write your days once a year, once a quarter, once a month. It's important to rewrite your goals every day, because every day, different things happen in your life. Maybe today I have to put 110% in my work because we're short-staffed and I gotta be there 110%. Maybe tomorrow, all of a sudden, my spouse, my significant other is sick. I gotta be 110% for my family. So rewrite your goals, the things that matter to you. Don't lose sight of that. Make sure that you know what matters to you. Be intentional. And this is the kicker, Dr. Jennifer. This is what I've learned. If you don't write your goals, your items that are important, your activities that are critical for that day in your agenda, then your agenda becomes somebody else's agenda. And that's what I call distraction. Sure. Most people wake up and they have an agenda that's pretty open or a lot of empty space. Then what happens is all of a sudden you send a message to the universe and the universe fills that agenda for you with distractions. All of a sudden people are calling you and say, hey, can you help me with this? Sure, I help you. I got a free time. Oh, can you help me with that? Yeah, I'll do that. Oh, can you stay a little bit longer? We need you. Oh, sure, I don't have anything to do. But when your agenda is full, what happens? You don't typically attract those things, but even if you do, you can look at your agenda and you say, Dr. Jennifer, I would love to help you, but I see that I'm committed all the way until 6 o'clock today. Yeah. Could I call you at 6 o'clock and help you? And you know what Dr. Jennifer's going to do? She's going to call somebody else. And that somebody else is going to have a free time in their agenda. And then you're off the hook. And they even tell you, I don't even need it anymore. So make sure that every single day, your agenda is full with the items, with the activities that are aligned with the goals that you set out for yourself that morning that you said they were critical. And that's how you actually stay on purpose every single day, motivated every single day, and more importantly, grateful and full so you can give to others. So you don't get drained by the time you get to the office, home, and your honey says, how is your day, sweetie? You don't say, oh, I'm exhausted. Oh, my goodness, you should have seen this patient came back. And we let those few patients drain us instead of 90% of them that gave us all this amazing feedback of how great they were feeling. We let 1 or 2 people completely drain us out of the joy of coming home and saying to our sweetheart, it was the best day ever. Oh my God, my goodness, people are responding. They're getting healthier. They're being more engaged. We're reversing a lot of these chronic illnesses. And I'm so grateful to work with this company that is doing this every single day.
Yeah. All right. On that note, we'll take a quick pause, everyone. Dr. Fab, you and Dr. Trina are up for a quick round of some speed questions. For the rest of you, if anyone needs to use the restroom or transfer between sessions, now is the time to do so. And we'll be back in about 5 minutes. Thank you so much, everyone.
All right. We're going to put up a little timer here just for a couple of minutes so everybody knows kind of when we're going to be back. If I can get this to work on my screen. And Dr. Fab, we're going to do just some fun little activity here, a kind of an icebreaker, if you don't mind, kind of some fun stuff. I did want to say too, I wanted to ask a question. Parker principles, my favorite. I wanted to ask, are you still kind of living by those? And my favorite is loving service is my first technique. I'm curious where you are with Parker principles. What's your favorite? Where are you at with those?
Well, that is also one of my favorites. Loving service, my first technique, really means that your intention for serving other comes from love, which is it's just, there's no limitation. It's limitless. So You want to treat every patient that if they were your grandmother, your grandfather, your favorite uncle or aunt, your cousin, your daughter, your sister, and that's where it comes from. My favorite, actually, from Dr. Parker's principles is love. Develop a compassion to serve that is greater than your compulsion to survive. And all that principle says is, don't focus on survival, meaning what is important to you. If you're thinking every single day, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this, you're in survival mode. Every single day you're surviving. But if you wake up every single day, how can I serve those around me better? And you start getting creative and you start giving more, all of a sudden you realize that your needs completely go away, because it's only through serving that actually we attract into our lives. My mentor used to say, if you realize that money is a byproduct of your service, you focus on service rather than making money. And I learned that lesson over 35 years ago, and I never deviated from it. I don't think about money, I think about service every single day, and that's what keeps me so full.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. I could just hear you talk for hours on end about that stuff. So thank you for that. That's amazing. I was sharing with a patient the other day, just real quickly. I was talking about my own experience and my own health, and then how I became a doctor of chiropractic, and my experience with my father. And I got kind of emotional in front of the patient, and I thought it was kind of weird, but what I did, and the reason I got kind of emotional is I thought about that patient. I thought about my own father, who passed away at 57, and one of the main instigators of me becoming a doctor of chiropractic. It was really, I couldn't help my dad, but I can help someone else's dad or someone else's loved one. And so you hit the nail on the head there, certainly with me. And again, that hits me right in that sweet spot of my heart when when I'm talking to patients and I look at them from that lens. So thank you. Awesome. So much for that. I appreciate it. Well, Dr. Laverne, looks like we're back on track here for the 9:30. We didn't even get to our fun stuff, but sorry, I hijacked the agenda there a little bit.
Okay, no worries. I was actually getting really excited about those speed round questions, but I guess Dr. Fab, if you come back next year, we'll try to go, double time on those. So,
of course, anyway, I would love to.
Let's get back to our interview. Give me 1 second. Hilarious. Here we are. Okay, so thriving in the new normal. Your I want to say, is it podcast or is it a television show?
It's a television series.
Television series. Okay, great. I have seen some of your posts on social media, but between my busy schedule, I haven't been able to follow. But I wanted to further expand on this concept of self-care. And I guess I wanted to ask you, how do we relanguage the past year and a half as to say that we are living it more as thriving and not just surviving? And I guess I wanted to know if you can tell us a little bit more about your experiences with some of your clients and the people that you've been interviewing, because I think you've done over 70,000 interviews in the past year, and maybe share with us some common best practices that you've noticed in these people.
Well, that's a great question. And what happened was that I mentor very successful people, and I've been doing that for the last 5 years, more as a way of giving back than anything else. And I realized that when the pandemic first hit, I was telling everybody that it was going to be a 2-week vacation. I kept telling everybody, don't panic, just take 2 weeks to be home, remodel your house, do whatever you need to get to do the things you've been putting off, for too long, and just get to be relaxed and not be thinking about working so hard. And then all of a sudden, I realized that we weren't going anywhere, that things were not changing. And a lot of industries and a lot of businesses were really struggling and having to pivot. And so what I did is, anytime that I'm presented with a circumstance that I don't understand, something that is challenging, I typically identify 2 or 3 people that have successfully done that, and I interview them. I ask them questions like, well, Tell me, how did you react to this? What was the one thing that you felt good about that made the difference? What was the one lesson that you learned or a mistake that you feel you made? What do you wish somebody would have told you, once you surpassed it, but when you were going in the middle of it? Things like that. So I started calling some of the most influential people that I know, Dr. Phil, T.D. Jakes, Ivan Meisner, from different industries, Jack Canfield, Mark Victor Hansen, and many others. And I kept saying, what does it take to thrive today and not merely survive? And that's how the show came about. And I started doing interviews, and the interviews were so well received that then they got picked up by a channel called The Best You, which is one of the biggest personal channels of personal development. And that's what we've been playing in all Apple TV, on Roku, and Google Play, and Amazon Fire. You'll find it everywhere. But here are some of the things that I've learned. The first one, and write this down: circumstances never define the person. Circumstances never define the person. What defines the person is your response to those circumstances. So one of the things I learned by a lot of these successful people is that they did not become victimized by the circumstances of the pandemic. Like most people shut down, most providers. We had some providers that unfortunately were working in buildings that were shut down and they could not get in. We had other specialties that were not considered urgent and they were completely stopped. We had other providers like chiropractors that we became essential because we were dealing with the health and wellness of the individual and try to support that health as much as possible while they were going through a very difficult time. So depending on your specialty, you found yourself in a position like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? So what I noticed is that the providers that were actually succeeding were the ones that were taking advantage of the dialogue, of what I call the script. Either you let your patients listen to the news every single day and become educated by the media, which we don't know if it's completely true or not true. As you know, there's been more inconsistency in the media than ever in the history of media. So that created a lot of confusion to the public. And I'm in the media, so I know for a fact that people were calling in saying, well, you had this expert say this, and you had another expert say the opposite. Who do I listen to? They're both in your channel. And that's what was happening. So the first thing that we did is that we recommended everybody take ownership of the scripting. Call your patients and say, Mrs. Jones, we were just talking about you here at TrueCare this morning, and we were just wondering how you were. This is a difficult time. And then let's see what Mrs. Jones says. Maybe you want to ask, well, Mrs. Jones, we were wondering, what is the number one health concern that you have during this pandemic? Let's see what the worry is for Mrs. Jones. And then you go back and say, well, Mrs. Jones, we want you to know we have this and that solution. We have this and that treatment. We're here for you and your family and your friends. And that's the reason that we're essential providers. And with the doctors, the providers that did that, their practices double and triple during that first to second year, while the other ones were reduced by almost the same. 30 to 40% was on average on the first year by many providers. So remember, taking ownership of the dialogue, that was a very important thing. Number two is making sure that you are educating the community, right? Not just your existing patients and past patients, but educating the community as to how your services can support their biggest concerns. So for instance, for us, we found out that there were a few things that the pandemic were creating and people were very much concerned about. I'm going to give you a list so you understand, write them down. The first one is lack of energy. For some reason, the people, whether you got the virus or not, whether you got the vaccine or not, they were reporting a lot of lack of energy. The second one was a lot of lack of sleep. Over 100 million Americans were reporting that they were not sleeping very well. Another one was joint care, which is your pains, your joint pains and discomforts. Another one was immune support, right? People were hearing about this is a virus, well, that deals with the immune system. I don't really know what to do with my immune system. How do I support my immune system besides the other things that I may be doing? So that became a good topic to start talking to your patients about. Another one was weight control. My first year, it was the quarantine 15. I had to talk about 15 pounds the average American gained during the first year of the pandemic. Now that's the quarantine 25, just so you know. So the average American has gained 25 pounds. So that's a big concern because we already have an obesity problem. So talk to your patients about obesity and what are the potential complications, and maybe suggest some healthy tips and things that they can do. And the last one was brain health. A lot of people were complaining about the fact that cognitive decline, dementia, Alzheimer's were very big concerns. The numbers were staggering. We were seeing more and more people reporting it. And those were very big issues. And then the last one, and I would say as a general, is the mental health of our patients. And I can tell you by speaking to the administration, the mental health challenges that are going to face America over the next 3 to 5 years have never been seen before in the history of mental health. So they're preparing for tremendous challenges because of all the stresses and all the challenges of mental health that we've had during the last 2 years. But they think that we haven't even seen the beginning of the worst. And the worst is going to happen between 2 to 5 years is what they're predicting. So they're gearing up for a lot of that. So just be aware of that and make sure that you ask your patients, are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling depressed? Mm-hmm. Do you have any suicidal thoughts? And then that will engage them.
Yeah, that's so true, Dr. Fab. We have a very, how do I say, I want to say robust, but an amazing behavioral health department at TrueCare. And I feel so much for those providers because I know that they have just been slammed and slammed and slammed. And even, you know, for ourselves, like in the private sector, it's really hard to get appointments into behavioral health these days. So they are definitely backlogged, and I'm sure that that will continue. But yeah, thank you for bringing some attention to that topic. Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit. And this is more an observation that I've had for you, Dr. Fab, over the years. As you know, you've been my friend for a very long time, close to, I'd say 12, maybe even 15 years. And we've had the opportunity to travel a couple of times through chiropractic conferences together. And you were very fundamental in supporting my nonprofit with the Red Cross. And we, you know, made presentations to the Red Cross in Europe. And one of the things that I would always observe of you when we were interacting with, for example, an Uber driver or the clerk in the lobby at the hotel is you seem to treat everyone with the same level of respect, in the sense that it always made an impression on me that, you know, we would be riding from the airport to the hotel and you would strike up a conversation, you know, and ask them about their lives. And sometimes you would, you know, talk about chiropractic with them, but in other occasions you would just listen to their lives, and you always made them feel special. And so I kind of started doing that just without you telling me to do so. But like, for example, last night I ordered a pizza for the kids, and I thanked the delivery man, gave him a tip, but also just, you know, wished him like, hope you have a great evening, you know, hey, how you doing tonight? And you'd be surprised when you ask someone those questions, they're almost not expecting it. Like the cashier at the grocery store, they're so stuck in their routine. But when you take even 2 seconds to acknowledge them as like a human, the response is amazing. So I guess I wanted to say how this gets back to our talk is that along our career path, you know, we treat these very complicated patients at TrueCare. You know, a lot of them are on 10 plus different medications. Some of them are seeing the behavioral health department concurrently with our primary care and even our chiropractic or dental departments. And there are times that, you know, it can kind of come as a curveball and your day's going great and you get to that after lunch patient and they showed up maybe just couple minutes too late for their appointment time, and then after that it's just an explosion. So I wanted to get your tips on how we can maintain that respect for them, continue to serve even when it's a challenge.
You know, that is such a good question. So I would say for me, it began with my parents' values. I grew up with parents that came from very wealthy families, and they realized that that was a privilege. That was something that the rest of the world did not enjoy. So they raised us, 5 boys, with tremendous amount of humbleness. And that's the best word that I can use, to make us recognize that it wasn't about us. It was about the contributions that we make to the benefit of others. That was what we were praised on every single day. One time, I don't know if you remember, I got nominated with an award called Heroes for Humanity, and the other nominee was the Dalai Lama. And when they called me, I called my mom and I said, Mom, I can't believe I got nominated for this award, which I got, by the way. And the other nominee is the Dalai Lama. And she said, well, honey, remember that it's not about you. It's about what you do for others. So I don't want you to be thinking too much about this. Just be grateful that you get to contribute and focus on that. And she humbled me so quickly, but that's how I was raised. So I would say that was the first impression. The second one, it was Wayne Dyer about 28 years ago, a dear friend of mine and a patient of mine for many years. He said to me, Fab, if you look at people, if you look at humanity and you realize that they are not human beings living a spiritual experience, but that they're actually spiritual beings living a human experience. So I, at that time, began to see everyone as spiritual beings, as perfect beings, no matter the difficult patients, no matter the patients. I always said, love the unlovable ones because they need it the most. And when you have an unlovable patient and you love them and penetrate through all of those barriers, they become your biggest referral by far, because most people will never have the patience to love them that much. So I learned very quickly to just love for the sake of loving. And then as I started learning about psychology, I took about 5 psychology courses in college and then philosophy courses. And I learned that the human beings seek one thing more than anything else. And this may surprise you, but it's validation. They seek validation. So what I make a point every single day, no matter who I come in contact with, and you see me, and believe me, you can ask anyone, I validate every single person that I'm come in contact with. So if it happens to be a taxi driver or an Uber driver, I validate them, because the world would not be the same without them offering that particular service, especially to me at that time. If it's a waiter in a restaurant, a manager, a hostess, if it's a dry cleaning, if it's the person that you pay for your gas, if it's a grocery store, if it's whoever, just validate them. And the best way to validate somebody is compliment them. Yeah. Find one thing in them that you feel good about. It could be their smile. It could be their eyes. It could be their hair. It could be what they're wearing. It could be the way that they were so attentive with you and the way that they were serving you. Many times we do that, but we don't pay attention to it. So the thing is, when we have patients walking into the door, remember that they're already struggling. They're already going through a difficult time. So I find that the providers that go and break that pattern and then all of a sudden show a little kindness, love, attention, observation, validation, all of a sudden it changes not only the person, the chemistry of the body, because we have studies that have shown that when someone is loved, the chemistry, you produce different hormones. Yes. When you feel love, validation. And that's what I've learned to do for many, many years. And then lastly, if you work with me a whole day, you will notice that I say, I appreciate you, probably 50 to 100 times a day. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. Because most people are not told that. That's a way to validate them. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. And those are the things that I've learned over the years that work extremely well.
Oh, yes. I have proof of that because Dr. Trainer and I always exchange and I appreciate you. So I think that something must have processed and we absorb that into our brains just by knowing you. So yeah, that's great. Good stuff. Okay, so we're just going to shift gears. Our time is coming closer to the end. So I wanted to kind of talk about some components of our career in the later years. And this brings me back to some of our travels in Europe. And one time we attended the European Chiropractors Union convention together, and I'll never forget this moment, but it was probably about, I think it was 2010. So yeah, it's almost 12 years ago. You asked me in the hotel lobby, what was my legacy going to be to the profession, to my family, and whatnot. And I can tell you that this question floored me. I had never even thought about it. I think that over the years, I was just, trying to get through school, trying to figure out where I was going to practice, moving to Italy, learning Italian, maybe getting married, maybe having kids. And then all of a sudden, boom, this guy's asking me what my legacy is going to be. And I was overwhelmed. So what I wanted to say, what I wanted to ask is, how does defining our legacy help with success?
That's a very good question. And it came to me from different sources. One of the first sources was a dear friend of mine named Stephen Covey. And Stephen wrote a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you haven't read it, I recommend it highly. It's still one of the best-selling books of all times. One of his 7 habits was begin with the end in mind. Very important. Begin with the end in mind. So whatever you choose to do now, begin with the end in mind. What is it that you want to end up having? In other words, think of the outcomes you want to have before of the duties and activities that you're going to do, right? Makes a big difference, right? Because you want to be the person that you want to be before you can have, before you can do, so you can have. So the formula for success for a lot of people is that I got to do a lot to have a lot so I can be a lot. And actually the success principle is totally backwards. You first need to be, even if you're not actually having those things right now, you need to have the spirit and the attitude and the mindset and the behaviors of the person that already has them. And then what you find is that because you have that, that leads you to doing things that are different than the ones that you would have done if you never knew what the being was, that then will allow you to have the having much faster. So that was the first introduction. And then I started interviewing a lot of millionaires and billionaires. And what I've learned from my interviews from them over the last 30 years is that in the first 25 years of our lives, we spend a lot of time in fulfillment, doing the things that fulfill us, right? The things that we want to have and do, and we don't really care, right? We abuse our bodies, we abuse relationships, we do a lot of stuff because we're being very selfish. The second, 25 to 50, we do a lot of things that make us happy. All of a sudden now we realize that, you know what, those things are not making me happy. I'm going to change my friends. I'm going to stop drinking so much. I'm going to stop doing drugs. I'm going to do the right thing. So that makes you a little happier. But the last 50 to 75, most of the people that I interview that are extremely successful think about, how am I going to be remembered? What is my legacy? And that changed everything for me, because then I started saying as a young man, why don't I begin with that as a young man? Why don't I give you an example. Right now, you're working for an amazing entity, TrueCare, right? Your legacy doesn't necessarily have to be how you remember as an individual. It could be your contributions to TrueCare and how TrueCare will be remembered as an organization that provided tremendous care for others. That's one of the ways. For you personally, how you want to remember is, if I was to interview all of your patients, right? Imagine this. You're not going to practice anymore. You're going to retire early, right? So we're giving you an early retirement. Now we're going to go and send a camera crew, and we're going to interview your patients of the past. And we're going to ask them a few questions like, what was the one thing that you liked the most about Dr. Laverne?
Yeah.
Or that impressed you the most? What was the one thing that you didn't like about Dr. Laverne? What was one instant that Dr. Laverne did something that really made a difference in your life?
Yeah.
And then you start thinking about, oh my gosh, what will people say? And that's when you start thinking, wow, if I want to end up with a different outcome when I retire, I have to start changing how I'm behaving. If right now you're not taking, and remember, with patients, one of the things that we've learned over the years is not about quantity of time, it's about quality of time. Yes. So many times doctors want to talk our patients into healing. That does not work. Just take care of them. Just be straightforward, be honest as you can be, and be compassionate. That's really all they want. Be a good listener. Just listen. Doesn't have to be for a long time, but be attentive, and you'll be surprised. They'll tell you things that you never thought that they would tell you, which will guide you to make better diagnosis and better treatments for them. So I really live my life like that. I always, and even now that I'm going to be 56 in a couple of weeks, I ask myself every day, okay, Fab, what can you do today to improve the contributions and the legacy that you're going to be leaving behind? And then always remember that our children are not listening to what we say, they're watching what we do. So if you want to leave a legacy, I always say the biggest legacy that we have is what we live in our children, not for our children. Remember that. As providers, we want to give them more than we had. We want to buy them expensive cars, expensive toys. We want to give them more and leave them more behind. But in reality, the most important thing is what you live inside of them, because that experience will allow them to make good choices for themselves, where they will be actually independent and be able to be free to do things right and not necessarily be dependent on others. And that's a big lesson that Les Brown taught me. Don't worry so much about what you're going to live for your children. Worry about what you're living in your children, and make sure you spend time for them.
Amazing, Dr. Fab. What can I say? This has been a wonderful hour with you. Thanks so much for all this great information. If any one of our provider audience today would like to get in touch with you, what are the best ways to reach you through your social media or possibly your website?
Well, the nice thing is that everything that is me is right here. As you see my name right here is drfabmancini.com is my main website. From there, you can go everywhere, all my social media, my TV show, my podcast. You can actually have my cell number or my email from there and contact me directly. So if you have a question, if you have something that you need or something that you want clarified or a suggestion or something, don't hesitate to reach out. I mean, remember, my value comes from the value that I bring to you. So I hope that this was very valuable to you and you got some good takeaways.
Amazing. We appreciate your time and we wish you all the best and hope to see you again real soon. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're going to take a break real quick and we'll get back to the main sessions after the trivia and the other games that we have going on. We'll jump into our second speaker with Dr. Bruce Lipton. Thank you all for your attention and your time. See you in a little bit.